WLRN Video presents.
Okay, so welcome to WLRN, Agnes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I think we know each other from the Women in Media Conference, right?
Yep, that's where we met. It's the first time I saw you. You were singing to open that up.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So that was in June of 2018, and it was a conference that WLRN sponsored, and I helped to organize. Some of the speakers at that conference were Megan Murphy, Julie Bindel, Sheila Jeffries,
Gail Dines was there, Lear Keith. There was
Gail Dines, Lear Keith, Ruth Barrett. It was amazing, and that was in June of 2018 in Chicago. And you know, the trans activists didn't know about it. It was a secret conference, so all of those famous feminists got to be under the same roof with nobody protesting. It was quite an amazing experience and awesome to meet you.
You too.
I remember us dancing at the dance party that night.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. I've been thinking about that, how dance is different for men and women, and like when women get together in female spaces, like you give us enough time, eventually we start dancing. If there's any music.
Right on.
Yeah.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in feminism, Agnes?
Sure. Yeah. So I I think I sort of grew up with it. I often think about how fortunate I am in that respect. Like when I was growing up, I grew up in kind of like a little working class neighborhood of Ann Arbor. It was just this weird little enclave of a lot of people who are, in Section 8 housing and food stamps and so on, but it was also like kind of hippie-ish, and there were some women that lived there, like my sister, my friends' moms and so on, that like kind of grew up in the second wave, even if they weren't necessarily participating in it, like in that culture. So I had that influence, and it like pretty much as soon as I was able to have the awareness, I've got a younger brother. Just the difference in how boys and girls are treated, like I just had this like deep sense of injustice about it, how boys could hit us and tease us and try to make us cry, and it was just kind of hand waved like, oh, he likes you, he doesn't know how to express it. And we couldn't use that back at him. Like we couldn't say, oh, I just kicked mud in his face because I like him.
Right.
Yeah. So there was that. And then I think it kind of went into the background as I hit my teenage years. Like I'm not a believer in brain sex at all, but I think that there is something to like that sudden rush of hormones that happens when you become interested in boys. If you're straight, like you become more willing to let certain behaviors slide. And like I definitely had that kind of lib feminism is for boys too, and boys are hurt by patriarchy too, and girls can be just as bad. That kind of thing started creeping in. I think it was sort of an era too in the in the late 90s of like post feminism and empowerment and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. And was it in the late 90s that you were lured into the sex industry? Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
um well, my teenage years were sort of rough. I had an eating disorder. Like I I really didn't deal well with the sudden sexualization that happens to teenage girls. Like pretty much as soon as you hit puberty, grown ass men start just saying like really awful, demeaning things to you and about you, and like nobody does anything. So yeah, I started starving like around age 13 or so, and like junior senior year I started hanging out more with like kind of a partying crowd and smoking weed and drinking and that kind of stuff. So it was kind of like a slow uh self-harming, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
then
when you say you starved yourself, you mean you had anorexia?
yeah.
Yeah.
um And like as I sort of grew out of that, I made friends with some girls who had similar experiences, and we just kind of like encouraged each other, which was really cool, except we kind of went straight from that to smoking weed and drinking and hanging out with boys. And it was a time too, like 98, 99, 2000, where like girls started wearing really, really tight, like outfits with the Playboy logos, and boys started like openly talking about their pornography use. It wasn't so much online yet then, but like, you know, you'd go to a party and they'd have it playing right there on the TV. Like it became like, really, if you're cool and you're hip, then you're not gonna be a prude about this. Like it's nothing like it is now. Now it's a nightmare, but like even back then, there was kind of the idea that this is the way things are, and if you've got a problem with it, there's something wrong with you.
And were your parents aware that you were running with this crowd and going to these parties where pornography was shown and stuff like that?
They didn't know any details like that. They knew that I was out late and they weren't happy about it, but they were recently divorced and just kind of focused on their own stuff, I guess. So, but yeah, like I had a few experiences kind of ranging from he was not a gentleman and he sort of took advantage of you, all the way to the like being hospitalized with a head injury because an ex-con tried to kill me. So I had some experiences of sexual violence then too, which really kind of rocked my world. I think at the time, like I just decided that I was too sensitive and weak and made myself easy to take advantage of. So I decided that that was something that I needed to just like squash down inside myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a friend of a friend who had been stripping. There was like a local strip club, and the way she had put it was that she was just making all this money and she was going to buy herself a whole new wardrobe and a horse. I was always super into horses, and like other acquaintances were saying, no, it's not like that at all. Like the strip club world is really dangerous and she's hurting herself. But like in your teenage mind, like the things that are rebellious are the things that you're going to go for, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Wow. So this friend of a friend introduced you to stripping. What can you tell us more about that? Did she help you meet somebody at a strip club that you had an interview with? What was the process like of getting you in there?
It's actually crazy how easy it is. It was the closest strip club was like one town over, and I'd been hearing about it since high school. Like boys, as soon as they turned 18, would like come to school talking about going there for their birthday and their favorite stripper and how hot and gorgeous she was and how well she treated them. Like they made it sound really cool. Like they did. Like what kind of boring old fogey would have a problem with that? And you know, I was wanting to move out and buy a car and pay for college and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, like the sort of like trades that are available to boys at that age. I tried to get a roofing job. I wasn't getting hired. Like it's kind of stripping was really the only way that it seemed possible. I was waiting tables at that time, but even working like the best shifts, I couldn't get an apartment on my own and a car and pay for school and all that. So I went in. The way they do it is they have an amateur night every month, and like the amateurs compete for a prize that you can win. It's like a $500 prize. But what isn't said out in the open is that whether you win or not, like the manager will come up to you at the end if he likes you and just offer you a job right there on the spot. Like there's no W-2 forms that you have to fill out. They do ask you for your ID, but that's the sum total of it. You're not an employee. The way they get around any kind of labor laws is that you're considered an independent contractor and you actually have to pay the club to work. So that's how it got started. It was really, really fucking awful from the start, actually. Like the way I built it up in my mind was that I was gonna be like this sexy goddess that men were gonna pay for the privilege of watching on stage, and you know, like just wads of 20s and all that kind of stuff. And it was kind of like the polar opposite of that. Like they make it really, really clear that they see you as a form of livestock. Like you dance on stage for a certain number of songs. By the second song, you have to be fully naked because it was a fully nude club. And if you don't, you're fined. You have to like pay the club a certain amount of money if you don't disrobe in time. But the stage is just a really a minor part. Like that's basically you advertising what you have for sale. I sound so nervous.
This is a really hard topic, and I just appreciate so much that you're willing to open up about this. And if at any moment you don't want to talk about something, that's fine.
No, it's fine. I just wasn't expecting to. I guess it all kind of comes back. So yeah, after you get off stage, like I think it's about every 3 or 4 songs, all of the girls have to walk around to every table and ask the men if they want a lap dance, because that's where the money is.
And are you all nude at this point?
No, so the way Michigan laws were at the time, at least, is that clubs that go full nude can't serve alcohol, and you can only have your panties off on stage. The rest of the time, when you're just like walking around, you've got usually a top on too. You're just kind of like bikini, stripper heels, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you have to go around and ask all of the men if they want a lap dance. And it's really clear that some of the men just get off on not just the power of that, but the hurt feelings of telling women no. Like the ability to just say like, no, you're old, look at your saggy tits. Like, and they'll often grab you and like literally like they're feeling a piece of meat. Just kind of par for the course.
So degrading. And what is a lap dance for our listeners who may not know what that is?
So I had to be shown how to do this because I'd never been inside a strip club before. So they asked one of the more senior girls, it's women, but it's called girls, whatever, to demonstrate for me. So they had me sit down in one of these booths. And back then in Michigan, still, these laws have changed too. The booths were separated, but they couldn't be curtained off. Like there had to be a bouncer sitting there and a video camera, and like the men had to sit with their hands beside them, like they were not allowed to touch you. So and then the woman would just kind of dance and like rub her butt against the guy's crotches. There were little steps that you could like put your foot on, and you know, like just kind of grinding sort of dancing. It was really awkward for me too when I was doing that. Like it's really such an intimate thing, and to have a stranger that.
Yeah.
Years later, I ran into that woman again at a rehab. Turned out that she was on a lot of cocaine at the time, and she was selling it to it was everywhere. There were no women that were not on drugs. None.
It's like they need to numb themselves so that they can perform the work, you know.
Utterly, completely. I mean, I had a really hard time with it, obviously, but I decided that was because I was oversensitive and too uptight, and like this is just what the culture was now. Like I'd really adopted this "if you can't beat them, join them" mentality.
Mm-hmm. And did you make a lot of money? Were you able to pay for college and get a car and all of that?
So the first night, no, because I was just so like shell shocked. But coincidentally, within a couple of days, somebody offered me heroin. And at that time, I'd already tried ecstasy, tried cocaine once. Like I was just in this kind of state that no kind of warnings from adults would register at all, because I'd seen what the adult world was, and it was hypocrisy and cruelty, and yeah. So heroin doesn't get you drunk, like you don't lose control like when you're drunk, and you're not like out of touch with reality like when you're high smoking pot. It's like you without any negative emotions, all like anxiety and sadness, rage, those are just mellowed out. And I got high and I went to the strip club and I made like $350 in one night.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the formula.
So that became a pattern.
Yeah, immediately.
And do you feel like you needed to use heroin in order to do the job?
Oh my God, like the two were completely like inseparable. I was making a lot of money for about 6 months, like $300 a night minimum, but I very quickly found a boyfriend who found like a cash cow in me. Basically, he had a drug problem, and I mean, how was he going to pay for it? I was. So yeah, I had to get high to go to the strip club, and I had to go to the strip club to get high. Within like 6 months, I recognized that it was a problem. Like I'd seen the movies where people have horrible withdrawal and all of that kind of stuff, but I mean, I wasn't taking anybody at their word at that point. So I was just like, oh, when it becomes a problem, I'll just quit. How hard can it be? And I managed to stay clean for a few days, but I still needed to pay rent and all that kind of stuff. So I tried going into the strip club sober, and it was just a no-go. Like, words cannot express how disgusting those men are. I mean, subhuman is a word. They know what these women's lives are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how utterly devoid of compassion.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like a nightmare. So you had to pay for the heroin, plus you found this boyfriend along the way who was taking your earnings from you. So in the end, you didn't really even get to enjoy the massive amounts of money that you made.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I was handing it over, but I was paying for my habit and his habit and for our rent and like to keep my car gassed up and stuff like that. So like, no, I wasn't buying myself nice clothes or going on trips or anything like that.
Or saving it.
No, of course not. And that's, I mean, I was in the strip club world for years, and that really is the story. All of the women. I think I met one woman who was completely sober, and she was raising her child and trying to go to school. Other than that, like every single one, without exception, at minimum, they're smoking weed and drinking. And no, they're not saving their money, because I mean, even if you do really well, the strip club takes at least half of it, and like you got to buy these new outfits and the hair stuff, and all the while, like what you're selling is becoming less and less valuable, because it's the one place that the more experience you have and the older you are, the less money you make. So I mean, I saw too what happened to the older women too.
When you say older, do you mean somebody who's like 30?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's you're about to retire, and they retire to the streets. Like they become prostitutes. So yeah, funnily enough, in Michigan, I danced some in Virginia. In Michigan, I think about like 10 years ago or so, the strip club owners formed like a, what would you call it, an association, and started lobbying members of the state house really hard to get regulations lifted. And I actually remember this. I remember one of the managers coming up to me and asking me if wouldn't I prefer to have more freedom to dance how I'd like without all these regulations, and be able to like make my own rules and that kind of stuff. And like even back then, as high as I was like, you're so full of shit. Like these regulations are all that's protecting me. So now that's literally what it is. The video cameras are still in the lap dance room, but there's no tape in them. The bouncers are on the outside, and they're not paying any attention at all. You have to pay them off to get them to even look at you. And there's curtains in between all of the rooms, so they've become de facto brothels. I've even heard of some strip clubs that will sell condoms to the patrons and the dancers. A friend of mine was raped in one of the rooms, and if you physically defend yourself, you're seen as at fault and you're sent home or even fired.
Horrible and so unfair. So the topic of this podcast is women in dance. Can you talk to us a little bit about what dance was like for you growing up before you got anorexia? What it thought, what did dance mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
And before you were lured into the strip club where you were dancing for these men, how did your perception of dance change? What was it like when you were a child? And then what did dance become for you when you started working in the sex industry?
Well, when I was little, my girlfriends and I would often have these dance parties. We'd like just dress up in our leotards and tights and stuff and play our favorite music. We'd like rock out to Spice Girls or whatever. And one of my friend's moms was kind of like a shaman-y priestess-ish person. So she often had gatherings of women where they'd all be singing and drumming and dancing, and it was just a really like safe, healing space, I guess. Yeah, women dancing together is just so utterly different than when there's men involved. And then as I got older and started trying to starve the woman off myself, I became attracted to the ballet world. It really wasn't like the stage performances and the costumes and all of that. Like I really loved the kind of Zen-like atmosphere of the studio where everybody is working on like achieving perfection and through like all this discipline. I don't know. But there was obviously something very unhealthy about that too. Like as a ballerina, you have to be like severely malnourished to aesthetically, and also like to be able to, I think, even carry your body weight on the tips of one toe. Yeah, I think that there's really just that's one of the ways that what's female is subordinated and harnessed and turned into a tool for the male, right? Like
through patriarchal forms of dance, such as ballet,
exactly.
such as stripping,
Yeah.
you know, but people think that there's a huge distinction between ballet dancing and the culture of ballet and strip clubs, but really, what are those differences?
It's a difference of degree. It's on the same spectrum, right? Like either way, you're performing this like extreme pantomime femininity that men find pleasing, and like they're calling the shots, you know, even in ballet, like all the big choreographers and stage managers are men. When ballet first got popular in the late Victorian age, the famous ballerinas had to have rich male patrons that helped pay for their apartments and their costumes and all that kind of stuff. And the ones that didn't reach fame just ended up becoming prostitutes and courtesans in their early mid-teens. I remember reading about that years ago too. And it's kind of come full circle too. Like Russian ballet is the world famous kind of center of ballet.
You are listening to WLRN.
So you were saying about Russian ballet and what it's become.
Yeah, so during the Soviet era, it was super world famous, and there were these cases of defectors, like American and European companies would try to poach Russian dancers. But since the fall of that regime, since the state isn't sponsoring the arts anymore, one, the level of artistry, I think, and a lot of critics think has fallen, but two, the ballerinas once again have to find oligarch patrons to be able to afford apartments and to like get the plum rolls and all that kind of stuff. Like it's come full circle, and I think that it really sort of lifts the mask of what this is really about at root. Like
Yeah.
you're absolutely an incredible artist, and your discipline and physicality is to be admired, but at the end you're being used as a tool.
And dance in ballet is less about self-expression and more about male fantasies and choreography that's pleasing to men. It's a male-dominated world. Even though the ballerina is held up on a pedestal, she's been constructed by a male choreographer, a male, playwright, or
the stories themselves of like these captured swan princesses and are one aspect, but like the pinnacle of perfection that you're aiming towards is to turn your body into an instrument, to embody the music and the role. And isn't that at root what patriarchy is about, is turning the female body into a male instrument?
Good point. Yet dance itself, in and of itself, can be an incredibly expressive vehicle for women to experience a feeling of freedom and liberation. So in that sense, I feel like it's especially sinister that dance is controlled by male power, because it really does have something inherently attractive about it that makes it so that we can express ourselves, but they don't want that, right? The patriarchy doesn't want that. They want us to become, like you said, instruments of their pleasure, and through the choreography that's created by these male, often misogynistic choreographers. So dance, when you were growing up and dancing in leotards with your friends, was pleasurable. It was a good experience. But then as you moved into your teenage years and adulthood, and you had anorexia, and obviously you weren't in a positive relationship with your body, as so many women experience. What did dance become like, especially when you were engaging in dance at the strip clubs? What did it become for you?
That's a good question. I think that it wouldn't be possible to continue going through with it if there weren't any like positive, gratifying aspects of it. And dancing on stage actually could be fun. I got to pick my own music, you know, and the stuff that I danced to was definitely pretty different from what everybody else did. And I could feel it. I mean, it was obviously it had to be sexual, like it had to be things that made me feel sexy in like the hyper feminine patriarchal ways, but like it was definitely a sort of power, you know, like it felt good to see heads turn and everybody flock to the side of the stage. So I guess, yeah, like from that kind of pure joyous freedom that we have as girls, like the bonding experience, something is taken out and shaped to, I don't know how to word this. Maybe we intuitively know what aspect of our dancing is appealing, and that's the aspect that we like grow and nurture, you know. Even dancing in just regular clubs, I think women do it much differently when it's all women than when there's men there. Like the hip swaying, titty shaking.
So you got to choose your own music. Did you also create the choreography?
Yeah.
But the requirement was that it be sexual.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I couldn't get up there and tap dance. I mean, I bet if I put my point shoes on, the fetishists would come out, but no, like we had to have the 6-inch heels and all that. And I mean, the heels make it really difficult to do much other than gyrate. But I mean, the pole is actually, obviously, because now there's a whole like pole dancing trend, but the pole, like climbing up and down, is pretty athletic, acrobatic. Some of the women could do amazing stunts. So yeah, you find things to enjoy, just like in prison.
Right.
But, yeah.
Yeah. So how were you able to get out of the sex industry?
I mean, I guess I always knew that that was a dead end street. I just got to a point where I didn't particularly care. I figured eventually I'd just overdose. And I ended up getting locked up. I went to jail a few times, and I did a year in prison. And that was really kind of the end of it for me. By that time I'd hit 30, and like the strip clubs themselves had changed a lot. It was always a hard line for me that like I didn't meet men outside of the club. I wasn't giving them hand jobs or anything like that. But I knew that that was the only way I could continue in that world, and also that world had like basically made that a requirement by that point. So I couldn't strip to make the money for the drugs anymore. And I'd gone to jail for the drugs themselves. So like, and I wasn't dying. So something had to change. And a guy that I'd been with for many years by that point, who, I mean, in all honesty, he was pretty decent. He was a drug addict like me too, but he tried, I don't know, not getting into all that. Anyway, he died like a week after I got out of prison, and he was kind of my drug doing buddy. So I didn't have that anchor, I guess is a way to put it, like keeping me in that as much anymore. Um, and I mean, I just couldn't keep stripping anymore. Like I knew that if I went into prostitution, that would be the end for me. Like I couldn't survive that emotionally. Stripping was bad enough. Um, so
So after you got out of prison and this boyfriend died, you just, was his death kind of like a wake-up call for you?
I mean, there'd been so many wake up calls, but addiction is so powerful that, you know, you can find a way to put yourself back to sleep. But I mean, just being in prison had kept me clean for over a year, which is the longest I had been since I started. And I mean, the job prospects for an ex-con junkie stripper aren't great, but I just had to find something. There wasn't really any choice, so I just started working in restaurants, which I've done on and off before already. So yeah.
What's your relationship to dance like now that you're out of the sex industry?
It's actually funny. It's funny that you bring that up, because I've been realizing lately how little music I actually listen to, which is really weird. I've always listened to music, and I wonder what that's about. Like I don't really dance or listen to music much anymore.
Hmm.
Um,
Do you think that that might be connected to your past experiences and that it's just too painful?
it could. I don't know. I mean, the unconscious mind is mysterious. Um, yeah.
And what do you think dance would look like outside of patriarchy? Like, what do you think dance is inherently? If it wasn't tainted by patriarchy, what is dance?
I mean, that's kind of like asking what is music, right? Like, uh, it's kind of the connection between our biological animal selves that are connected to the living world around us and in us, and our kind of conceptual brainy selves, right?
Mm-hmm. And that when you bring those worlds together, it can be amazing to watch somebody express themselves genuinely through the body and through dance. I see dance, if if it wasn't tainted by patriarchy, I see it as a vehicle for communication through the body, expression. You can say so much with the body. And wouldn't it be amazing if we could have women only dances again, like the ladies did back in the 70s?
We need to. I mean, we know that there's a war going on against the living biological world, and that's closely tied in with the war that's going on against women. And that's one of the ways that we fight back, is that we take that back. We have to. Like, we can't allow ourselves to become disembodied.
Right. Your cat looks like it's fully in his or her body.
It's been going crazy. There's been snow on the ground since the beginning of December out here, and they're getting a little housebound. They're silly.
Yeah. Nice to see your cat jumping up onto the furniture and then leaping down, very comfortable in their body. I think we can learn from cats in that way.
Yeah.
But is there anything else you'd like to say about dance or your experiences of dance, and what dance could mean for women and feminism?
I'm sure after we finish, there's gonna be things that I'll be like, oh man, I should have said this. But I think that, like, at root, that's got to be a really core thing, that we're being so strongly pushed into this digital disembodied realm, and we need to find a way to bond in real life and take our bodies back. And like, absolutely, we need to be getting together and creating feminist analysis and, you know, gathering statistics and evidence. But there needs to be an aspect of our activism that's about bonding through like basic embodied things like music and dance. Otherwise it just becomes tedious.
Yeah, totally agree. So, and can you tell us before we end the interview a little bit about your writing projects that you've been engaged in and what is around the corner coming out soon?
Yeah. So I've always been highly interested in the environment and animals. Animal rights was actually kind of my introduction to like left politics and stuff like that in middle school. So I'm researching the connection between patriarchy and ecological destruction. That's a really superficial way to put it, but like basically my thesis is that the reason we're murdering the natural world as a species is because we discovered this new method of social organization about 6,000 years ago. And like basically every time humans have created civilization, they've created patriarchy and destroyed their land base. So going way back into prehistory and ancient Mesopotamia, through the witch hunts and like the political fallout of that, through today, how that's turned into like turning feminism against itself, and like the Trojan horse of postmodernism plus neoliberalism. So I did write an essay touching on that for the new book, Spinning and Weaving, that's coming out, the collection of essays. I had a really hard time cutting it down. I had to cut out a lot, so I'm going to expand it into a full-length book, I think. And also I'm kind of collecting evidence to put forward about how gender identity shouldn't supersede biological sex in law. I think that we really need to be working on the community and state level and spreading awareness. So
that's great. So you're a feminist activist and a writer. Spinning and Weaving is going to be put out by Title Time Press, which Ruth Barrett runs, and it's going to be edited by Elizabeth Miller. And I think it's supposed to come out in March. I have an essay in there, and so do some other WLRN collective members. I think there are 45 pieces in that book. So I'm getting pretty excited for it to come out. That's wonderful that you have a piece in that book as well.
yeah, I'm excited too. I can't wait to read them all.
Great. All right. Anything else you want to say to our WLRN listeners before I let you go? Agnes, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
No, thank you. And hopefully I'll see you all March 8th in DC.
Right on. Yep. Women marching on the mall in Washington, D.C. We got to do it. Got to let the Biden administration know that men are not women, and they should not be counted as such in the law. Definitely. So, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Thistle.